Good afternoon, one and all. James here. I always have a moment there, just check my sound is going in correctly, and it is fabulous stuff. Thank you for joining me. You R184 students potentially doing a January exam. Well, if you're here, you probably are doing a January exam, unless you're watching this post-January, in which case you're doing a summer exam. We're here live. What date is it? It's 3rd of January, 3:45 in the afternoon. We really appreciate your time and attention. Thank you very much. Now then, what we're going to do here, folks, is I'm going to take you through a whole series of revision with regard to the R184 paper, and it's very much an association with what I've already published, which is a national mock exam, mark scheme to go with it, and also the model answers for that exam. I've also published notes pages which go along with this particular session. You really should have those notes pages in front of you. I'll touch on this again in a second, but those are kind of the key requirements of how this session works. You'll see as we go through it. Now, other things, if I could ask a couple of favours from you first of all, if you're able to, please consider offering us a like on YouTube or on the YouTube video that's on our landing page, and also, if possible, a subscribe. It really helps us if you do that. We keep all the content obviously through YouTube completely free, and it's really positive if you give that bolster of a like and a subscribe. It really helps us to do that sort of work. Secondly, if you want to ask a question during the session directly to me, you can. On the hub page, there is a live chat there. We don't use YouTube live chat anymore, I'm afraid, but there's a live chat on the hub page where you can comment, ask questions. They will be sent through to me when I have a little break in the middle, and then again at the end I'll answer those questions for you. So do be encouraged to do that, and feel free to tweet, to post, and to share the information that you're studying with us, and that would be a wonderful thing. It's actually my colleague Marta who's personing the chat this afternoon, and she will bring any of the questions that you have to me to my attention, so that would be absolutely wonderful. Now, we expect the session to last in between 45 minutes and an hour. I will do one section of content at work, and then we'll have a bit of a break in the middle, and then I'll do the second. Okay, so we should be together for around about that time. I hope what is to come is very useful to you. Now, I've got my digital pen in hand ready to go, and this is always the tricky bit for me. I want to make sure that I can transition here without losing feed. This should work well, all being well. Here we go. Okay, how to actually use this session, folks. You see here, obviously, we're covering R184 issues which affect participation in sport, contemporary issues, we often call this, of course. Now, a couple of things. I'll allow you just to read these bullet points, folks, kind of obvious, but have a look through this. This is what we want you to do, okay? But can I stress to you, you should be taking this session, and you may well be here with me live right now, or perhaps you're taking this on demand, but you should have the session itself, but you should also add to that the notes pages just below the session, if you haven't got them yet, the exam paper, which relates to the national mock exam that I personally have written. Okay, the national mock exam, you should have the exam paper, the mark scheme for that, and I've written model answers for you. Now, if you do those things in combination, that is a magnificent partial preparation for your R184 exam. Now, I use the word partial, I'll come back to it in a second, because I'm not covering every topic of the course here. I'm covering a selection. Now, I've also given you 1, 2, down to 3, 4, 5, 6 sporting performers here who you can go have a go at applying any of this information to. Have a go at applying all these things that we're talking about as we go through, and you'll hear me doing that in the sessions as well. Now, the national mock exam itself, it covered all of these areas, okay? But you'll notice, for example, I'm not going to talk today about emergent sports, sporting behaviours. I'm going to leave those out just on the basis that I've got to sort of choose and select some things to cover in the session to keep it within an hour, but I'm going to cover all of these other areas. Can I come back to the fact that this is partial? We are not covering the entire course here. I've got the course online for this exact purpose if you need to do that, but here this is a sort of a fast-paced revision session. And can I stress to you, you may need to repeat the revision session that I'm providing here. I'm going to go at a real lick, a real pace. Keep up with the notes, but you might want to come back and sort of clarify main sort of ideas and main points at some point. So you can do that obviously on demand, on What's on Demand. Okay, brief pause there, and then I'll get straight into it. So, folks, as I started this video, the cat has just come up to me and decided he's going to purr. I don't know if you can hear him in the background. Hey, Jessup. Anyway, we're going to look here at barriers to participation. Okay, oh, get off. All right, so barriers to participation. So, First of all, can I stress that what I'm going to go through here initially is generic. These are the generic sort of barriers that people might face to participate in regular physical activity. Remember, by regular physical activity, we're talking about for adults 5 times 30 minutes, for children 7 times 6 minutes per week with one sort of higher intensity. Anyway, that's what we're talking about. So I just want to go through a list and we're going to start applying it. These are the barriers people might face and start to apply these to different user groups. First of all, family commitments. Oh my word, I've got a lot of these. There's stuff to do, folks. When you're it's hard to express really when you're sort of working, and I'm 47, right, so my kids are a bit older, right, but geez, there's a lot to do when you're a parent. So family commitments, that can be grandparenting as well, it could be children who are carers, for example, as well. Okay, so we could also be talking about lack or just a level of disposable income. How much money do people have available to them? Okay, that's actually an important point, whether someone will join a gym, a health club. Lack of transport. How do we get to something? How do we go mountain walking if we live in the city, for example? What about role models? We tend to follow examples. Okay, people love following examples of others who have done something before us, etc., etc. Therefore, role models matter. Also, specifically family role models. If, for example, our parents are particularly active, it's pretty likely we will follow that, and if we get support in order to do so, therefore we're more likely to participate. What about activity provision? If we have not got a climbing wall near us, we're not that likely to go climbing, right? That's not available to us. If there's football everywhere, however, we're quite likely to take part in that. These impact. What about not knowing things about it's almost a point on marketing, isn't it? Do we know that there's a new service opened up down the road where we could go and take part in pickleball or tennis or paddle or things like that? If not, then we might not obviously get to have a go at it because we didn't know. What about coverage we see in the media? This comes back to our role model here, right? So do we actually get representation of different gender, ethnicity through the media? Good question. And what about employment, unemployment? Presumably unemployment links quite closely to disposable income. That could have an impact. Also, employment is a time factor as well. Now, those are the generic barriers to participation. You can apply those in any directions, folks. But what I want to do here is I want to draw you down. I want to draw you down here to a particular example. What might be the barriers in this case to something like disability? Now again, I'm using the language of our course here, but someone who's experiencing disability, what might be common? Well, they, especially if it's a physical disability, they might experience lack of transport to a venue. That in many cases won't be a lack of, but it might just be a more challenging transport. There might be a lack of specialised equipment or adapted equipment. Many sort of leisure centre sports clubs, they're developed on the idea of non-Paralympic or non-disability sport, and therefore the setup is not like that commonly. We might experience people might be less likely to have disposable income, perhaps because they're not working or working less. We might also experience a lack of appropriate activity provision. Look, the bottom line is there's fewer blind football clubs than there are football clubs, for example. Okay, so less provision. We might be experiencing a lack of role models. We might be experiencing less coverage of Paralympic sport in the media than Olympic sport. Think about, Wimbledon week and how much wheelchair tennis you get to see compared to non-wheelchair tennis, for example. These are how we can apply these principles. We can apply these barriers, in this case, to disability. What about if we were to take that further? We'd say, okay, we've also got the idea here of something like family commitment. So what we've got in this particular example is we've got the idea of kind of like working parents, or we might even say in the specific example here, we've got the idea of single parents. Now, a single working parent might be a particularly emphasizable. I've got someone in mind, actually, who experienced these things. What might be the barriers? Well, they've got massive family commitments. They might not have a lot of time on their hands. They might be spending the majority of their income on their family, for example. They might not have affordable transport. They might not have loads and loads of sporting role models. They might not have family role models, or they might have a lack of support around that, would make it particularly difficult. There might not be the right activity provision, things like timing when sessions are open, the cost of sessions. And again, because we're talking about
parenting, rightly or wrongly in our society, females still do the majority of domestic parenting. Therefore, that lack of sort of coverage and gender equality might be particularly relevant to the more females that experience single parenthood than the males. Now, that's no knock on dads. I'm a dad myself. I'm not knocking dads. Of course, dads are essential. Oh my God, I'm getting myself in hot water here. I'm going to stop. I'm going to offend someone if I'm not careful. Anyway, we can also relate our barriers to age, or let's say the elderly. Okay, so where would the barriers take us here? Well, the elderly might experience lack of access to get into a facility, lack of appropriate facilities, not suitable facilities. These are interesting points, aren't they? We're saying here that potentially someone's going to say, okay, because maybe they're slower, because, for example, they might be experiencing back pain, they might need to park closer by, etc., etc., etc. That needs to be available. What about provision? Are there over 60 sessions? What about specialist sessions for the elderly? What about provision of a sort of non-weight bearing sessions such as water aerobics and water fit and this kind of thing? Transport might not be driving anymore, might be harder to get onto the bus, the train, whatever. They might not know about activities because they're not being marketed through, a lot of us receive marketing through the internet, through Facebook ads, through Insta ads, through Google ads, etc., etc. They might not be experiencing that because they might not be there. Health issues are preventing their participation. They might have mobility issues. They might physically have restrictions. They might not be earning anymore. And golf clubs can be expensive, right? Sessions can be expensive, and they might not have the free time that they used to for all kinds of reasons. But these again would be the barriers these people are experiencing. And again, they're still general in the sense that this will vary from person to person, but these now specifically relate to the concept of age, or to, in this case, the elderly. Now, how do we go about solving these problems? These are actually the ways that we can solve problems. Now, again, you should be looking to apply these to the different examples that you have. So what have we got? First of all, provision is a critical word for you folks. What do we mean? We need programs to be available. We need sessions. We need activities. We need time for different user groups. This is what we mean. It has to be there. For us to take part in it, it has to be there. Yes, we can just go out running and so on, but lots can't. So provision needs to be there. We need the promotion strategy. So we need targeted promotion, the elderly, disability sport, gender specific, etc. We need role models. We need initiatives, more of which a bit later on. We also need an increase in appropriate transport, sort of free services, local transport, community transport. These things are important. You might not think about it at your age right now. You're probably pretty carefree, but actually those little services really matter to people. And in the town I live, there's numerous kind of community transport services that get people to the places they need to get to. Now, it's not always sport or physical activity, it's often to the doctor and things like this, but these things matter and they need to be provided. Anyway, availability of appropriate user group facilities and equipment. So, think about disability sessions. Think about sessions that are lower cost for the unemployed. Think about sessions and their times because that you're considering parents. This is important. What about access to facilities for all user groups? You could be thinking about things like a creche, hard word to spell, a creche, or a sort of a child-minding service in that area. We're also talking about pricing being appropriate. We might, for example, have a lower pricing during the day, off-peak memberships, this kind of thing, can help different groups. These are some of the solutions that we can start to implement for the different kind of groups. Now, again, I've made these as fairly general points at this point. I would strongly recommend that you go and have a look at how you can apply these to the different examples and case studies that we've provided for you. Now, this one, I should have made this a bit big. In fact, I'm going to make it a bit bigger. Hang on a second. Here, why do we want this physical activity to be done? And we're specifically looking at sport here, but I think it's about physical activity in general. What values can be developed through sport? Well, first of all, we get a concept of fair play, honesty, balance, sportsmanship, for want of a better term. Why is this important? Performers adhere to rules. They do not cheat. There's ethics involved in sport, and people can learn those ethics, those rights and wrongs. What about citizenship? Well, what do we learn through sport? We find out how we can create community links and groups. You know, the very fact that we're talking about user groups, teams, associations, this develops a community spirit, a sense of identity. We're going to take that to a national level in a few moments' time. We also get involved in local. This actually builds our community. Can I stress something to you folks? One of the real sort of positives in my life personally is being a volunteer, is contributing my time to sports coaching. For example, I've often been involved in football, table tennis. Those things really, really matter. You're giving to your community and you're providing things that are actually required. Do consider that in your life. It's something that you can do because it's good for others, but you can do it for yourself. It feels good to do that. Tolerance and respect. Now, notice the word "and" here. The actual thing, the example I want to talk about is tolerance. I don't like the word tolerance. Tolerance is like, it's sort of like you're putting up with someone, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? For me personally, tolerance is what I would do with sort of like a wasp that comes in my car, tolerate it until I can get it out. You know what I mean? I don't think we should be tolerating each other. I think we should be respecting each other. What do we mean? Sport can generate a greater understanding of different cultures. We can understand each other better. And we can also have what we'd call a shared value. So you might sort of perceive someone as really different to you, and then you're part of the same sports team. You know, this person is just like me. You know, that's pretty likely to be the case. We often over-focus on the differences between people in society, and what sports do is they do emphasize the similarities, the sameness, the togetherness. Sipping my coffee, excuse me. Inclusion is a value of sport. We want equal opportunities for all participants, sport for all, movement for all. That means all, the young, the old, the Olympic, the Paralympic, males, females, everyone. And therefore we want all groups to be able to participate. As we mentioned already, sport can unite, bring people together, and it can unite a national population. Think about during the Olympics, think about during World Cups of different sports, World Championships. We often feel patriotic. I've often said in these videos, never felt more patriotic than when I went and was a spectator at the Olympic and Paralympic Games in 2012. Not a very patriotic person, really. I don't mean I'm not patriotic, I just don't feel... My family's sort of half British, half Spanish, so I'm kind of a melting pot, you know, so I don't necessarily feel British. I feel kind of like a human being kind of thing. But I'll allow that national pride to come out around sport. I get that sense, that feeling, yeah, come on. You know, it's you know, I like it. Anyway, excellent. We've got here, performers strive to be the best that they can. That's a really important thing. This can be applied to all aspects of life, okay? So like personal drive, personal improvement. We've also got maximum effort. We don't often see that in a broad range of experiences in life, and we see it in sport commonly. We also get the idea of team spirit, and I've touched on this a bit. Support given to follow a team and a squad. We've also got being able to work together. You know, we've got that notion of teamwork as well. This can even develop into communication, leadership, and so on. These are really nice principles that sports can develop. Okay, let's try and drag down here. So I'm just going to take the briefest of pauses, folks, just to sip my coffee. One sec. Now, moving on for those sort of general sporting values, we can have a look at Olympic and Paralympic values. I'm going to read this oath to you. Get comfy, brace yourself. The Olympic oath, established by Pierre de Coubertin, I'm not going to go through his whole history, effectively the French aristocrat who recreated the ancient Olympics in 1896 in the modern Olympic movement, a movement which is still very popular and going today. Anyway, the Olympic oath is as follows. We promise to take part in these Olympic Games respecting and abiding by the rules in the spirit of fair play, inclusion and equality. Together we stand in solidarity and commit to ourselves to sport without doping, without cheating, without any form of discrimination. We do this for the honour of our teams in respect for the fundamental principles of Olympism and to make the world a better place through sport. Brilliant written down, isn't it? I don't want to be cynical. I always reflect that this is the Olympic oath and its biggest sporting commercial partner is McDonald's. No comment. Let's not come back to that. I actually love the Olympic Games, but I actually think it could be a billion times better, fairer, more inclusive, more represent. I'm not going to get into it. Anyway, that's what this is. Pierre de Coubertin, French aristocrat who established or re-established the modern Olympics in the image of the ancient Olympics. Quite a lot of difference. You might notice within this as well, that sporting value stuff we did a few moments ago, it sort of comes through quite strongly in here, right? That's what we mean by the Olympic oath. Now, I'm going to change canvas here, and I'll come, or am I? Hang on. No, I'm not. Here we go. So I just want to talk about the values, or the primary values that are described with both the Olympic movement and the Paralympic movement. Remember, by the way, that Paralympic refers to parallel Olympics, the Olympics which I suppose are considered to be running alongside the Olympics. That's the Paralympics in this sense. That's what we mean. Now, let's look at the Olympic values. In Olympic values, we talk about excellent, respect, and friendship. Now, that feels good, right? That feels like a pretty fantastic thing to aspire to. We agree. Where I get a little bit sort of concerned, I suppose, is that the Paralympic values are determination, inspiration, and equality. Now, none of those are negative. They're all kind of negative. But I also want to take that one and plop it in here. Why? That is also excellence. And I don't know. I sort of find... anyway, I'm not going to get into it. But these are the values that are associated with the Paralympics and the Olympic Games. I feel really cynical here. I'm sorry, guys. I don't mean to... I genuinely love the Olympics and the Paralympics. As I said before, some of my best moments of my life. But I don't know. It's hard for me to say to you, like, well, the Olympic Games are about excellence, but the Paralympics, go on, give it a go, determination, try. No, it's also about excellence. This is elite sporting performance. Let's get it clear. Anyway, I'll get off my high horse at this point and shut up. Now, I'm going to change canvas. This may well be half time.
So, folks, let me check the sound. Yes, we're good. So, there we go. First half. Plenty there to get your teeth into. Sorry for any controversy I might be throwing out there. As I said just now, I absolutely love the Olympic Games. A couple of things with the Olympics. These are just opinions, by the way, not really do the revision. A couple of things with the Olympics that sort of worry me a little bit. I'm going to touch on WADA actually in a second, which is kind of one of them. The sort of traditional amateur nature of Olympics, which in many ways is very aspirational and very positive, is very selectively applied. And lots of people, including administrative side of things, make lots and lots of money out of the Olympic Games and Paralympic Games. And therefore, I just think that should be shared a bit better for the people that are actually producing that experience, especially the athletes, especially the spectators. I'm sure you can think about people that are incredibly well out of the Olympics, but they're the actual minority anyway. I won't go on about it further. There's a couple of issues there. Maybe I should write a blog about it. I don't know. Anyway, if you've got questions, folks, please do fire them in. I would really appreciate that. I got one question which was about making applications. Generally speaking, in your exam, especially when it comes to user groups, the examiner's going to ask you, look, can you apply barriers, solutions, etc. to a particular user group? They're going to ask you that in relation to what we look at: disability, working parents, elderly, etc. They're generally going to ask you that. But I would encourage you to be preparing yourselves to be able to do that. Take effectively those models that I've put there. Like the barriers to participation for people experiencing disability, and look at how you would apply those to different user groups. And it could be interesting what you sort of produce off the back of that. That would be really sharp and relevant preparation for your exam, in my opinion. So those would be things that I would really, really encourage. The Olympic stuff, we're going to sort of move that on a little bit in the next session, because we're going to look at the second half of the session, because we're going to look at sort of major sporting events as well, and some of the features and benefits of hosting. You'll see. So we're going to touch on that as well. But yeah, those applications I think are particularly important. There's one thing just learning the possible barriers. There's one thing just learning the possible solutions. You've got to be able to take this. Say, okay, these apply specifically to this group and this group and this group. That's really the skill of what you're trying to develop, and rightly so, by the way. That should be the skill that we're developing on this particular course. Okay, enough of me waffling on. We'll get straight back into part two. I think this part will be a little bit longer, not massively, but a little bit longer. And I would best guess at this point, as I imagine, we'll be sort of drawing to a conclusion around about 4:35, 4:40, something like that, if that helps you. Okay, let me get my transition sorted, and hopefully this will go over nice and nicely, for want of a better phrase. Okay, and back to it. I feel a bit silly with this image here, because we're going to talk about initiatives, and it looks like this one. It looks like
this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one are part of This Girl Can. They're actually all separate ones, and they have sort of overlaps. Can I just stress This Girl Can first of all? This is a Sport England initiative funded by the National Lottery, and you've probably seen this one. There's been a lot of really positive impact of this initiative, and This Girl Can effectively, it looks to increase female activity levels, female participation. But can I stress, in activities that suit them. Now, I'm not saying that means that some activities don't suit women. Any activity can be a female activity, of course it can. But what we're saying is there's actually a specific attempt at making sports and activities more kind of female friendly or accessible or open or not as kind of esteem exclusive. Now, Rainbow Laces is a different initiative. And Rainbow Laces is an initiative actually developed by an organisation called Stonewall, and it's a representation of encouraging sport to be a more accepting and respectful place of LGBTQ plus people who are often underrepresented in lots and lots of sporting environments. I'm going to talk specifically about men's football here. This is where, for example, gay men, for example, are heavily underrepresented, or openly gay men are heavily underrepresented in men's football. The traditional reasons for that seem fairly clear, but this campaign, Rainbow Laces, is an attempt to do that. Kick It Out, of course, is an anti-racism, and it's a pro-equality campaign. It's been very successful in, for example, football. Sporting Equals, this is about ethnic diversity. Okay, so Sporting Equals is about ethnic diversity and giving all people sort of a kickstart, an opportunity to start the Great British Tennis Weekend. Oh, I feel a bit bad putting this one on here because it's not as popular and it's not doing as well anymore, I don't believe. The Great British Tennis Weekend, I don't know if it's been run this year or not, but it is typically run in September, and what it is it's a series of free events around the country, and it tends to be at the end of September, of course, trying to give people the opportunity to engage in tennis. Why? That's because tennis is quite expensive, isn't it? And that's why. Now, Chance to Shine, this is a cricket initiative. Now, what's happened with cricket is that lots and lots of cricket has been sort of removed from state schools, and Chance to Shine is about getting cricket back into state schools and into local communities. Why might we do that? Whilst there's nothing wrong with independent and privately educated children having access to cricket in their independent schools, it's also right that we should have that in other spaces as well, right? And that's what Chance to Shine is trying to achieve. So some nice ones there. Now, we're going to look at PEDs. When we're talking about PEDs, we're talking about performance-enhancing drugs. We are referring here to illegal performance-enhancing drugs, those that would be considered cheating, okay? So we are initially going to talk about the performer, the actual athlete themselves. What are the positives and negatives? First of all, why might they do it and why perhaps they shouldn't? Okay, so why does an athlete take a performance-enhancing drug? Well, first of all, they're more likely to win. They're more likely to make the first team. They're more likely to get better. That's why ultimately people take performance-enhancing drugs. That could be because they want to be faster, stronger, etc. They may experience more fame, recognition as a result of that greater success as they perceive it. They might become wealthier because of that success. Of course, winning Olympics, being the fastest, being, why don't I choose that example, being the gold medal winner. These come with accolades, don't they? And that gives opportunities for wealth. And the other reason why athletes might do this, or one of the advantages, that they will see it as level the playing fields. And this is about culture. And two examples that I want to mention with culture of sport. We've had real problems in athletics with drugs, and we have real problems in, let's call it road cycling, but cycling. Drugs has become endemic in both of these environments in different parts of our history, our sporting history. And as a result of that, everyone feels at the elite level they have to do it because the culture is such. I've looked at the Lance Armstrong case very, very closely in the last decade. Very intriguing case. And it's hard to forgive him for what he did, but at the end of the day, at some point, he was a 21-year-old who came into professional cycling, which had an absolute culture of cheating. And at some point, as a young person, he was forced to make that change. Now, I'm not forgiving him. I just think that's an interesting thing to kind of remember for doing that. Of course, I forgive him. What am I talking about? Anyway, why wouldn't an athlete do this? Well, damages their reputation if they get caught. Of course, they could be sacked, they could be banned, they could lose their financial income, their sponsorship. It's not good for you, not least because we are talking, this is not like going for a prescription to your doctor and they give you a few steroids for a bit of acne or something like that. No, these are massive doses of steroids, for example, that these athletes are taking, and it can lead to addiction in some cases. So these are the clear disadvantages to performers. But the other thing to stress, folks, is that there are also disadvantages to the sport if people take performance enhancing drugs, not just to the performer themselves. The cyclists that did this, Armstrong, Landis, all the others, the people that did this, they damaged the reputation of the sport as well. How so? Well, first of all, reputation, as I mentioned. Successful performers are treated with suspicion. So someone who is actually really clean and good will be treated as if they're a cheat because others around them are doing it. Loss of sponsorship, fewer spectators because they don't trust the activity, reduced participation levels, cynicism could be a word that we can introduce there, need to invest increasing money for anti-doping. This is expensive to catch cheats, okay? That money could be spent on participation levels, for example. People don't trust the results. They see it as I don't like this term, but they see it as a freak show, which can be partially true in some cases. Historical results are no longer reliable in the reviewing, and honest athletes are tarred or treated with suspicion, as we said up here. So these are the disadvantages to the sport itself of cheating, of doping in this case, and it's something that really needs to be considered really seriously. Okay, so yeah. Anyway, I'll stop blathering on, and I'll get to the next section. In fact, I'm just going to, before we get on to, I think it's WADA next, if from memory. There we go. I'm just going to take the brief as the pauses. As you can see, WADA is the World Anti-Doping Agency. And we should stress that this is not the organisation that actually implements anti-doping policies such as testing. Okay, what they do is they delegate to national associations. So, for example, in the UK, we've got UCAD, UK Anti-Doping. In the US, we have USADA, and there's loads of other, obviously international. I would normally say RUSAD here, the Russian Anti-Doping Agency, but there's been some controversy, obviously, in recent years around that. Watch the Icarus documentary. But they delegate to these. But what WADA do is they write a document called the Code. Okay, the Code, and this becomes, as it were, the Bible, for want of a better phrase, for the use of for how anti-doping, and these organisations must follow those protocols, must follow those mechanisms. Okay, so a couple of things we want to do. They have something called the whereabouts rule, and this is, in essence, this is so random and out of competition testing can occur. Okay, so we've got random testing and out of competition testing, because of course if we consider that lots of performance enhancing drugs are actually training drugs, not competing drugs, steroids, classic example of this. So what is the whereabouts rule? Well, first of all, the athlete needs to be registered to the National Association. That means that the National Association, of course, has their name, they have their email, they have their phone number, but also they have things like their address. They also have things such as their training environments, their training locations. They have information such as other addresses where someone might be going to stay if they're on a training camp or if they go on holiday. They have that information. They have to register that information so that random out of competition testing can take place. Now, one of the things to mention about the whereabouts rule is that if someone if a tester goes out, if someone gets 3 times missing tests, or someone misses the tester 3 times, this is considered a violation. I can't remember the exact time scale. It's not within 12 months. I have to check. I want to say within 4 years, but fact check me on that one. But this is considered a violation, and that violation can lead to a ban. There have been lots of examples where this has happened. I remember Christine Ohurugu, the British Olympic and World 400-meter champion. I remember Rio Ferdinand, the footballer, was banned for a missing drug test violation. I think he was banned for 8 or 9 months, something like that. So this whereabouts rule matters. Why? Because out of competition perhaps is the most important type. Out of competition testing is perhaps the most important type of testing of all. Now then, what testing methods tend to be used? Well, you won't be surprised to know that people give urine samples. Okay, that's useful for some substances and methodologies, but athletes will also be providing blood samples at times. This is really important for what's called the passport method. Okay, now this isn't literally a passport like you're thinking about it. It's the idea of, think about blood samples. Someone's sort of blood makeup can be monitored over time. Has there been a massive spike in red blood cells, for example? Is this person blood doping? So that sort of blood sample is important. Also, we can take, or WADA will suggest, hair samples. The history of drug taking can be held in the hair. Of course, hair can be attached to you for quite long periods of time, of course, and that they can be indicative. But also, remember the testing methods. We've also just talked about one of them. We've also got that whereabouts rule, which I literally just talked about. Okay, that's a nice method for you to be aware of. So all of these are kind of in the arsenal and the armory of WADA and the to delegate out to the National Association. Sorry, but I just want to mention before we move on to this, one of the issues with WADA is how it's funded. Okay, so I just want to be clear here: 50% funding of WADA is from the International Olympic Committee. Now that means that, yes, this organisation operates separately from the International Olympic Committee, but because it's funded, I guess you could argue that they are incentivised not to embarrass the Olympic movement, if we can put it that way. So I'll leave you to ponder that. I don't think it's necessarily going to get into your answers, but I do think that's an interesting consideration for you to make. Now then, we want to talk about major sporting events, of course, a big topic for us in this course. And what I've done, I feel a bit bad about this section of the course. I'm just going to sort of zoom us in slightly. I feel a bit bad about this because you're probably going to be well bored of this section, but nevertheless, I think it's important that we go over it. What I've done here is I've gone through a series of features of major events and given you examples. You want to try and get these into your answers. So some major sporting events are one-offs, okay? Example, I was at the London Olympics 2012, not competing, sadly I'm nowhere near good enough. I was there as a spectator. Some are what we call recurring or regular. Think about Formula One races or major finals. They happen year on year on year or week on week on week. Major events will have a major media presence, and think about the importance of sales and commerciality here, commercialism, because that just scared me. Because we've got the media there, this means that obviously in a second we're going to get sponsorship and this kind of stuff. Televised, subscriptional, this means free to air, obviously subscription, it means that people are paying to see that. Commercialization, this means that these events, yes, they're for sport, but they're ultimately going to be for profit. How? Advertising, sponsorship, commercial partners. These major events are typically international, okay? Think about Olympics, Paralympics, FIFA World Cups. Think about competitors who come to the British Open golf or whatever it happens to be. Spectators who travel around the world to see their teams, their competitors take part. Some are multi-sport, Olympics, Paralympics. Some are single sport, such as FIFA World Cups. A little bit further. I've put asterisks by these. Some are, air quotes, able-bodied. I don't like that term. It's the term that is going to be accepted in your exam. Some are considered disability sport, Olympics and Paralympics as such. Anyway, they tend to occur around world-class facilities. What I mean by that is we'll have the building of specific Olympic parks. Think about the Qatar World Cup, literally stadia being built for this purpose. They tend to be linked with positive values. The Olympic oath, we touched on anti-doping, we touched on it with WADA. But they can be associated with political issues, protest, terrorism. I remember the Beijing Olympics in 2008, which must seem like it was probably the year you were born, isn't it? But I remember the Beijing Olympics. Some of sort of Beijing sort of China's human rights record was really questioned. Obviously I wasn't around for the Munich Olympics, but there's always where literal terrorism occurred, and there's often a threat of terrorism in these sorts of events as well. So this sort of world attention can bring negativity to it as well. Okay, let's take things further. Can I stress to you that what I'm talking about here is an evaluation? We are going to look at the benefits and drawbacks of hosting major sports events, and these are specifically during the event. Of course, this could be pre-event, the bid. This could be post-event, the cleanup and the legacy. But I'm talking about the during. Now, when we're talking about evaluation, 3 parts of an evaluation. We need to cover the positives. We need to cover the negatives. We need to reach a balanced conclusion. That is, in essence, what evaluating is, folks. That's a great skill for you to sort of pick up on. You can apply this in PE and lots of other subjects. By the way, when we evaluate in maths, it's a different thing, just so you're aware. But for now, so what are the positives of hosting during the event itself? Well, we get a better social infrastructure that, of course, we'll actually experience better transport, this kind of stuff. People will feel good, patriotic. I don't know why we've got that twice, but let's say times 2. We've got increased in national status. We've got this like shop window effect. People see, let's say, the UK internationally. Hey, what a cool modern country with great sporting provision. We get greater national interest in sport. People become sort of more switched on. Think about Wimbledon fortnight, for example, when people are non-stop looking at tennis. Watching Andy Murray or Emma Raducanu, whoever. We get increased media coverage in sport. We get potential increase in direct and indirect tourism. People literally coming to the country because they've seen it through their box, their TV, their phone, whatever. And we get increase in short-term employment, so it creates jobs. But there are negatives, and those negatives are it's bloody busy. It can make a mess. We've mentioned the potential for terrorism. Thankfully, that's not common, but it has occurred on occasions. We get put if the host country does badly, people get a bit embarrassed. Perceived relegation of regions, less investment for non-event regions. Think about London, for example. Often attracts lots and lots of events. Well, what about Birmingham and Manchester and Newcastle and Nottingham and Glasgow and Edinburgh? Maybe the focus is sort of too centralised. Perhaps you can make the argument. And sometimes we get negative media coverage. So, for example, if the games are not well managed or they're not well run, imagine if the London 2012 Olympics had gone really badly, didn't went really well. But let's imagine it did; it would have been kind of embarrassing, right? And we sometimes get that if the home nation doesn't do that well, as we've said as well up here. So there's our evaluation. Now, if I was going to reach a conclusion here, what would I say? What would I write? I would probably say something. I'll write something like, "Look, when managed correctly, with the right investment into performance levels and infrastructure in the host city or country, there's no reason why hosting an event can't be a super positive experience for the members of that community. However, there are threats and these need to be taken seriously." Okay, so that could be a kind of a nice conclusion. Remember, when we're evaluating, we must reach a conclusion. And by definition, that's what an evaluation is. But it tells you other than that, by the way, they're wrong. Sorry to say it so bluntly, but I'm serious. That an evaluation needs a conclusion. Now, folks, I'm just going to pause there briefly, and I'll come back with NGBs, and we're very nearly there. Folks, we are very nearly there. I've got a cat cleaning itself. Hey, Jess, are you all right? We're nearly finished, boy. Right next to me, and we've got a big section to do here. What do NGBs actually do? What do they do? Now, in some case of NGBs, national government bodies, I really want to ask this question because some of them struggle. But nevertheless, this is what we're interested in. I want to talk about promoting participation first of all. What do we mean by this? They develop schemes, loads of examples of those. They make sure that there is media coverage. So media coverage is there and relevant, and they make sure that there are equal opportunities for different people. In other words, they promote participation. They also develop coaching and officiating infrastructure. What do we mean by that? We could be talking about level 1 qualifications. We could be talking about level 2 officiating, umpiring, coaching qualifications. We might be talking about elite officials. And the development of those elite officials, that needs to happen through the national governing bodies, but of course it happens with coaching as well. So the officiating and coaching infrastructure actually comes from the national governing body itself. Now, by the way, it does actually need to meet certain standards and it has to follow certain centralizations, but nevertheless, they organise tournaments and competitions. Think about really famous ones like the FA Cup in football, for example. We could be talking about the Netball Super League. Okay, actually, that's kind of an interesting one because it's actually slightly separate from the national governing body. I've written it down now, so I'm sticking with it. So they do that. They also change rules and disciplinary procedures where necessary. Okay, so for example, rugby introduced citing into their sport a few years ago. Citing is where someone's sort of poor discipline or aggressive action can be picked up on camera after something's happened or checked and punished, for example. That's a really good example. What about things like doping control? These things have to be implemented. We might just also get rule changes for what you might call excitement as well. You know, think sports like badminton, cricket, squash, they've all changed their rules to make the game sort of faster pace. The table tennis, another one, so it's more sort of engaging for people, and the national governing bodies, the organisation will do that. We're also looking at safety. So risk assessments need to be written by the national governing bodies and followed by others. Okay, we're also talking here potentially about safety guidelines. What are the standards that people need to meet? The national governing bodies will provide these, and obviously you can give different examples. Support's a really important one. Obviously, we've got the idea of insurance and technical guidance as well. But with support here, I want to be talking here about things like legal guidance. What happens if an accident happens? What happens if someone gets injured in a coaching session? The guidance for this is actually, or the support for this is actually provided by the national governing body. What about if an athlete gets injured and they experience I'll do that best meant to say a loss of earnings? When I write the word earnings, I always want to say earrings, but anyway, loss of earnings. If an athlete experiences a loss of earnings, the national governing body has to support that. What about policies and initiatives? We've looked at some here. Big one they need to be responsible for is talent ID, talent identification, making sure that people have that sort of possibility of coming through. They also need to raise participation. Okay, it's not just about getting international teams sort of doing well, but we've got to get a mass of people participating in the sport. That's the responsibility of the national governing body. And finally, we've got this idea of lobbying for funding. Now, national governing bodies work closely with Sport England, and they look to meet their targets, and they get more or less funding as a result of that. But they also need to lobby government in order to ensure that funding streams are maintained. Now, lobbying is effectively putting pressure on, or encouraging, in this case, to be paid money. Now, I've got a tiny little section left, and I've just got to change canvases. Bear with me 1 second. The last leg, the final hurdle. Obviously, we need to think about technology in numerous sort of formats, but I want to talk about technology, sorry for my cough, specifically focus on performance or elite performance. What is the role of this? Okay, so let's go through this. One of the clear opportunities is injury diagnosis. I've given an example of MRI scanners. That's going to be better for performance, right? Because we have more accurate detail of injuries. We're able to support their rehabilitation. In fact, I've got that point just here. Ultrasounds, hydrotherapies, contrast therapies, hot and cold therapy. There's all kinds of possibilities we could do here. But injury identification, treatment and rehabilitation is a massive improvement. What about actual improving training? Things like hypoxic chambers, oxygen tents. We can actually improve performance through technology as long as it's appropriately used. We could be talking about cryotherapy in there, like really rapid cooling and decreased swelling. We can also simulate competition. Think about a surf simulator or a bobsleigh start track, even if you don't have any snow. These, or ice I should say, these are ways that technology can bring real competitive performance to the practice environment. We also get improved equipment. So think about high-tech, lighter, more aerodynamic. Think about racing bikes. Think about sprinting suits. Think about the fabrics that people wear to make them slip through the air more smoothly, or the water. Laser suits. Do you know the story of laser swimsuits, for example? These were completely legal for a period of time, and pretty much when people wear these like whole body swimsuits based on shark skin, basically every world record was smashed by these people. And these days we've now got 2 world records per distance per sex group, per gender, and because this now banned these suits, but these suits were worn for a period of time, and those records exist, and so therefore we've got different world records. It's really ridiculous. I think they might have changed. I think they might have got rid of them altogether now. Anyway, we also got player monitoring. Think about things like GPS. Think about sort of trackers that performers wear, and they follow them through their performances. Sports science, we get biomechanical analysis, physiological testing, video analysis. These, of course, are improvements in the experience of someone. And we even get the assessment of potential or screening people. Anthropometry is a really interesting. I don't necessarily expect you to get it in your answers, but anthropometry is literally measurement of the body. Okay, now you might think, well, that's fitness testing, isn't it? No, I'm talking about someone literally, for example, getting you to hold your arms straight out horizontally and measuring the difference between your fingertips to the other side of your body, right? That might give them an indication. If they then look at the size of your hands and your wingspan, your reach, then they look at sort of the shape of your back. They might be able to say, well, this person is suited to swimming, this person is suited to volleyball, this person is suited to handball, and you could be sort of directed into that area. But just to be clear, these technological opportunities, they are for performers. We're not talking about officials, we're not talking about spectators, we're talking about performers here. And I wanted to talk about this specifically. Hopefully there's some really good examples for you. Right, I think that's all. Lovely.
Wow. There you go. Session. Let me just check if I've got any questions. And okay, one question here says, "What is talent ID?" Sorry, I didn't mean to use a term that explained talent identification. So, the idea being that national governing bodies, one of their responsibilities is to harness those people that have got kind of, I suppose, that sort of high prowess to perform really well in their sport. And yeah, talent identification, an interesting word, talent, and I'm not quite sure how comfortable I am with that. I guess talent is a thing, is real. I think it is. But obviously there's probably other factors. In fact, there are other factors that have far greater impact on someone performing well in sporting activities, and certainly when we come to participation, talent isn't important at all. So yeah, that just to answer that question. So that was the only one I got, on the basis that myself and Marta have another revision session this afternoon. This time for R180, that is the sports injuries unit, the other OCR Cambridge National exam that's this January. I'm going to let us finish slightly early. Imagine that, a bit of an early finish in your revision. So we've gone for about 50 minutes there, guys. Can I just stress to you how much we appreciate you genuinely for taking time with us. Do get involved with that national mock exam we've done. They don't necessarily need to do an assessment. You've got the exam, you've got the mark scheme, you've got the model answers there. But get involved with that, folks, because it's going to give you like a massive leap forward in terms of this exam this January. And again, you might be picking up this up as an on-demand recorded thing later, and it could be equally important then. But do give that a go. If you can pick up on the session we've done, complete those notes, have a real good look, perhaps attempt the mock exam. Work with the mark scheme, look through the model answers, maybe even mark those model answers. That would really, really serve you well between now and the actual final assessment there. So that would be our suggestion. Ignore me if you want. Okay, unless I'm told otherwise, let me just check that I'm not receiving anything else. No, I think we're all good. I am going to sign us out, play a little bit of music, and then I'm going to go and put the kettle on, make a cup of tea, and then I'll be on to my other session on sports injuries in a second. You guys won't be doing that, I don't suppose. Thank you for your time, folks. We really appreciate you. Thank you so much. Have a great, great afternoon. Good luck with the exam. Cheers.